It's season 7 of Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. We hit the 300 episode milestone this year, so don't forget to subscribe or follow us. We have a lot more to talk about. Hey, we're kicking off December with another first-time guest. It's Craig Polk. He's Senior Program Manager at Future Networks Tech Community for IEEE. He's here to share thoughts from someone new to the profession. It's great conversation. It's December 1st, 2025. Welcome to episode 309. Hey, it's the first week of December. We're kicking off the winter holiday season here at Radio Free 501c. And we are continuing our trend this year of first-time guests. So I'm really excited about that. But this month is chock full of holidays. So whichever ones you like to celebrate, I hope you have a wonderful time doing it this season. And again, as I said, welcome to Radio Free 501c. And this edition, I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I am the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting, which is my company, which also supports the podcast. So glad you're here with us today. If you have not yet subscribed or followed us on your favorite service, please take a moment and do that so you don't miss any of these wonderful conversations we've been having and that we'll continue to have. We're well past the 300 episode mark and we still have so much to talk about and we don't want you to miss it. And to our global audience, wherever you are in this big, beautiful world of ours, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And thanks again for joining us. This week, I am really pleased to be welcoming Craig Polk. He is new to the profession, and that's what our topic is. We're going to be sharing his thoughts on being new to the profession of nonprofit management. But before we do that, Craig, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Cecilia, and all of your audience. Thank you so much for having me on the show. As mentioned, my name is Craig Polk. I am a senior program manager here at the IEEE. So that's the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers. We are a nonprofit, a 501c3, that works pretty much to try to benefit humanity through technology. And I'm looking forward to having a chat about what it is to be in an association.
Yeah, it's really, I'm glad that you brought this up, Craig, when we first connected a while back, because for people like myself and a lot of the people in my network now, you've been doing this for a while. So I think sometimes we forget that it's not exactly the way other people do things. You have had that switch, I'll just say switch from for profit to nonprofit management. And you're fairly new, as you said. So, how many years have you been in nonprofit management now? And what are a couple of the things that you've noticed that are different?
Yeah, switch is definitely a good term. My prior life, I was an engineer, so in some ways, it is kind of almost binary. Some of these things are definitely 180 degrees different. I started in this nonprofit and IEEE in February 2023. So this coming February, I will be celebrating my third year. And from an industry perspective, we wouldn't really call that, I guess, new to the field, but one of the things that is always chatted about around the office is they keep calling you, new until you hit the 6 year mark. So from that perspective, I guess I'm still kind of, fresh on this. And there's definitely quite a bit, I would say, that's different coming from a corporate for-profit area into moving into nonprofit. Of course, the most obvious one is the main driving force of these companies, and a lot of that is in the name, right? Between profit and nonprofit. So that's kind of the main thing that I've seen, and there's a lot of little things that go into defining those.
Yeah, and that's a great point to start with because we all say nonprofit doesn't mean no revenue, but our focus is not revenue because we're not giving it back to stockholders. It goes right back into the organization. And I think it's interesting when people say mission driven organizations. And I don't say that because all organizations are mission driven, they just have different missions. So a for-profit shoe company is trying to make money. That's their mission, and they have a mission, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we're all mission driven as organizations. But what we do as nonprofits is we have a special role in society in which we help in a different kind of way. So we are connecting people or doing things in society like feeding the hungry or the homeless, or like you do at IEEE, which I'll be honest, I don't know anybody who uses the whole name of IEEE. We all just call it
I
IEEE.
had to put it in there, right? The
Right.
branding, marketing, you got to put it in there. That's actually one of the main, because we do things with students. That's one of the quick ways we actually identify if they know about us at all. If they'll say IEEE, or if they say, "Oh, I can't wait to help and volunteer for IEEE." So that's like a quick giveaway of what how they call our company.
So, well, when you switch, and first of all, that's a great tip for everybody out there working with their interns or new hires. What do they
Yeah,
call your group?
yes. Go on YouTube and listen to somebody else say the name of the company. So you have that in your back pocket.
Well, the last time I had trouble saying the name of the place I worked was the American Academy of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. And so, but fortunately, we all just called it the Academy once we got on staff there. So, and they're still out there doing a great job. And nobody really, it was funny, just as an aside, the HR manager I interviewed with said, nobody knows what otolaryngology means or how to say it. So we don't expect it. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's good. And it's obviously ear, nose, and throat doctors, but that's the only place they can say otolaryngology because most of us say ear, nose, and throat. So it's identity is important and how we recognize each other is important. So now that you're here, though, Craig, in the community, and we're so glad to have you, was there any sort of a culture shock for you coming from being a practicing engineer in the for-profit world into a nonprofit group?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say two things definitely come to mind, right? The first thing is I've heard that line about everybody has a mission, right? And it's not just companies and nonprofits that are mission driven. So I think what distincts these groups or these types of companies is really their focus. And
Mhm.
so, for-profit companies focus is really on the shareholders, as you mentioned, whereas the nonprofit, I want to say the focus is more on impact. And so I think for me, the gotcha story that I had was during my first quarterly readout. So I thought I was super prepared. I was like, oh, I got everything in line. It's not a problem. I was a little nervous going into this because being in a corporate setting, one of the first questions they always want to see or hear is what's your bottom line, right? What are you looking at from a financial perspective? How are you up or down, and what are you going to do to address that? So I set my presentation totally to follow suit. I was all ready and I said, okay, I have this all set. I know we're a little down. I'm got all of this detail to back up what happened, and I'm gonna, field any question that comes in. But I'll give you actually a question. So going in and being all prepared, you know what people say about plans. What do you think happened in my first meeting, my first quarterly meeting?
I'm going to guess it didn't go as you thought it was.
It totally did not. So I got in there. I probably had like 6 slides out of 8 that were just all on what happened with our finance. And the main leadership, as soon as I showed them what happened with finance and what the numbers were, they said, okay, go on to the next thing. And I was like, what do you mean, next slide? They're like, no, go on to the next part. Skip the rest of the finance. And that was like 90% of my presentation. And I'm like, what do you mean skip it? This is like the whole thing. And they're like, no, 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 go on to your impact assessment. And I had no idea what they were talking about. So I'm just sitting there now sweating, not understanding what they mean. And so that was part of the big culture shock for me, is being prepared to defend what happened when you missed mark. And I think looking at that from a focus perspective, it's not really in a nonprofit. And yeah, granted, people have to make revenues, they have to stay afloat. But when we were having these discussions, they all wanted to know, okay, what was your impact? What did you actually do? What were you able to accomplish? Yeah, it's not great that you had these financial issues, but what did they result in? Did you miss certain activities that you weren't able to do, or you're not able to get to certain groups that you wanted to do? So they wanted to know more about that, and they wanted to actually hear what we were able to accomplish. So that was a big, shock. That was a big culture shock of just what the focus was.
Yeah, because people want to see the outcomes more than they want to see the financial reports. And I've seen, I shall say, over my long and storied career, that organizations that focus on the outcomes tend to be more successful, like IEEE, and the ones that focus more on the financial report, like the money, how much did you bring in? Why did you not bring in the money? They tend to not move as quickly toward mission achievement, in my opinion, because they're too distracted by those kind of questions and they're not looking at the bigger picture and looking ahead. We need money in the nonprofit world because you've probably heard this one already too, Craig, no margin, no mission, because we need those resources to make things happen.
Yep.
So I'm not surprised that you were taken by surprise that they did not want to hear more about money and they want to hear more about impact. Did you feel that anybody prepared you for that?
I want to say there was some chatter about it, but I think it's a different community, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of people that are in the association community and in nonprofit communities, from at least my dealings, a lot of them seem to be there for quite a while. So some of these things are almost hidden gems, like hidden secrets that they have. And for us ones that are under 6 years and still new into this group, um, I think there's a little missing piece there of how the introduction of I guess I'll call it like a transplant, right? So I'm more of a transplant, right? Like I've had, a couple decades in another career and then moving over into nonprofit space. I don't really know how common that is. And, inside our organization, I want to say it's less common than people moving directly into association management. Um, because there are people that have been there for decades, right? We had just a past celebration. Somebody celebrated like 45 years of working in the company, which is awesome.
Wow.
It's awesome that people stay in companies and stay in these associations for so long. But us newbies maybe aren't as prepared for the shock when we have this indoctrination of or just being used to the profit world.
Yeah. And I think that's a great example because, as you said, there's people where you're working and a lot of other nonprofit organizations have been there for a long time. And when you're anywhere for a long time, you start forgetting what it's like not to know things. And you just assume that people know the things you know. And a great example of that is I was working with a client a couple of years ago and a very big trade association. So then they had a huge board because they had so many members. And so they had an executive committee that had, I don't know, like 18 people on it. And they started saying, well, but for the other board members, people know stuff, the stuff's out there. And I started asking them to raise their hand for how many years they had been on the board or on the executive committee. And as those hands started to come down, the longer somebody had been on, because I said, how many of you been on less than 3 years? A couple of hands. How many? 5, 10, etc. Then they all looked at me and they kind of nodded and they said, okay, we get your point. Because they've been there for a very long time. They had a lot of experience. So they had accumulated a lot of knowledge, but they hadn't realized that everybody doesn't have access to all that knowledge yet. And so they said, oh, well, we're going to start finding better ways to share information. And you're absolutely on target with that, Craig, because I've seen it a lot at the places where I've worked and with different clients, trying to bring on new people bring them in. Sometimes you hire somebody for their expertise, like a magazine writer. Well, they don't know anything about nonprofit management. They know how to write for magazines. So
Hmm.
they're kind of floating around and they don't know how to connect their work to what everybody else is doing. So I agree. We all have that on our list of things we need to remember to do better. So
Yeah.
hopefully your experience will also remind everybody again, oh yeah, everybody doesn't know everything. So one of the other things that people talk about with nonprofit that's very different is we have a different timeline for how we get things done. So were there any surprises for you in that area of association management?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think from my past experience, being in industry, we're so fixed on how the process impacts the finance. And for people that are in corporate environments and even people in nonprofit environments that use these different agile and waterfall processes, they've heard these terms like sprint before, right? And that's exactly what it is when you're in really you're sprinting and you're looking at, okay, well, this is the how the finance piece is going to look at it, and we have to kind of do a quick turnaround. We have to do this really, really fast. We have to get to our goal. We have to make sure our funding is filled. We have to make sure our project is complete, and we do it really quick, and we are very laser focused. Coming into associations and being in a nonprofit, it's totally different. So one of the things I should probably look to see if Agile has a process that's called Marathon, because I think that would kind of foot the bill better for how I've seen nonprofits work, right? And so getting back to that focus on the mission and the difference there, I think it's more of like a marathon. From what I've seen, the nonprofits, they understand there's immediate needs, there's things that need to be fixed right now, but they're also looking at these problems that are not easy to solve, right? Some of them are in people's health, some of the United Nations sustainability problems, things like having stability with water, with food, with education. These are not quick fix problems. They're very long based problems. They have a very long horizon on them. So nonprofits seem to kind of understand that really, really well. And having to kind of train my brain moving from a sprint to a marathon, it's just like what's exactly what it's like in sports, right? You train different if you're running a sprint versus the way you train if you're running a marathon. So so I've been having to, rethink how I collaborate and how I look at problems to try to see them in more of a longer term duration, and what, not just doing this immediate workaround or this immediate uh, issue, but what's the motivation to fixing that and how will that affect things down the chain?
I think that is a wonderful analogy, a marathon versus a sprint, because you're absolutely right. I agree with you. Nonprofit management is a lot more like a marathon sometimes, because we're bringing in more people to build consensus. We're looking at a longer timeline on getting things done. Usually, we're not known for doing things quickly. That's
Yes.
process.
That
It's like
yes. Amen to that.
so. Well, now when we were prepping for the episode, you shared that you were excited to be moving from for profit to nonprofit because you felt you had some really solid skills that you could bring over to nonprofit management. So, can you share a little bit about how you came to that realization and then how you use, which skills, I guess I should say, which skills you felt really fit well in a nonprofit role?
Sure. Yeah, I had kind of like it started around COVID. Um, when I was still in my for-profit role, I was moving more into people management. So kind of still doing a lot of the engineering things, but when I started out in research, I started out in product design. So I was doing a lot more things. So I worked with things. And as I developed in my career, I started working more with people because you realize, taking, not talking about AI or these different AIoT or machine to machine type of talk. Um, People use things. And the reason you use a thing is because it's either going to help you or it's going to help somebody else or it's somehow connecting people together. So in my engineering career, I started seeing that computers just don't network. It's the person who's sitting at the computer. They're really networking with that. So you're just not networking the technology, you're actually networking the people. So my career just kind of progressed into that. And around COVID, the company I was in had a reorganizational change, and so I was on the negative side of that organizational restructure. So I found myself, what am I going to do after being in this company for so long? And it was challenging times because COVID just started. Schools were closed, lots of companies were closing. So I had this awesome idea that I'm going to start my own company, right? I've been in teams that kind of built startups and have worked with startups. I was like, I could totally do this. It's not a problem. Started doing my own kind of consulting and did a lot of things on education, sustainable technology, like green technology. And when those two things kind of came together, a lot of those activities happened overseas. So kind of in like Africa and in Asia, and a lot of the projects were about how do we bring these technology into either introduce people or better their situation through technology, things like agriculture, medical, education. And I noticed that the skills that I developed from my technical life, I guess I'll call it my technical life as an engineer, to where I was moving in the management side, which again, if you talk to my past engineering colleagues, they'll call it the dark side, just because I'm a fan of Star Wars. So a lot of us engineers will call the management the dark side, whereas the tech side is the light side. So I had this transition for moving from one side to another, and noticed that some of the tech, even when I developed it and was doing research and product development on it, it can be used, to help people's lives. And then moving more towards that end customer experience to actually seeing the impact and seeing how the tech actually did it, it kind of forced me to do almost like a skills audit on myself and said, okay, well, I have this technical experience. I know how to build products. I know how to put teams together from a tech side, and I've kind of like now inherited this new superpower of bringing this um, customer need with this identification of a problem and starting to network people. And I think that was what brought me into the realization that I can do more good when I focus on purpose instead of profit. And that just kind of, launched me into what nonprofit roles were open and available.
And I think a lot of people did soul searching during the pandemic lockdown for a lot of reasons. I'm going to say something I say a lot. I know a lot of organizations let people go because they were startled by the lockdown and how that was going to impact things. And I think that's always the last thing you do, but it seems like it's always the first thing people do. So I want to remind people your people are your most valuable asset. So let's rethink that in the future if we have to reorganize or if the environment which we're operating changes dramatically, because it doesn't do any of us any good to let people
Mm.
go just because it's an environment we are not quite sure how to navigate yet. But we saw that a lot. We saw entire membership departments let go at membership organizations. So associations were getting rid of the membership department, but you're a membership organization. Did you really need to do that? So I think we need to ask those questions a little more clearly. But the benefit to us in the nonprofit management profession now, Craig, is you're here among us, and it's our gain. And so I'm so
Yeah,
glad you're here.
I think so. Nonprofits are the winning. But yeah, to that
Yeah,
point, I definitely think it's a little naive when they look to restructure and drop people. And I wish they had a little bit of more patience. And like this holiday time, this is always a reminder to me because I received my notification and was let go around the holiday time. So that's always, it's never a good time. There's never a good time to be let go unless it's the day after you win the lottery and you just have like $800 million from the Powerball. Then it's probably
that's
not
right.
that bad if you get notification the day after that. But I got notified around the holidays. It was very stressful because you're like, oh my God, it's the end of the year. It's holidays. There's going to be all these expenses. And something recent also happened with Verizon where they've just announced a huge restructure and they have like I think it's like over 13,000 workforce that's also getting let go now. And so it's never holidays are an exceptionally bad time. And I think uh, groups at least like group like ours that works in that space with technical companies in the technical industry. And, I know, Verizon Telecommunications is one of the areas where our nonprofit is kind of has a really good focus. I think it's important for the staff members that are on nonprofits as well as the members that are part of those associations to kind of understand, what's this impact doing to those people and try to see how, as staff, as other volunteers, as other members, we can kind of almost regroup, right, from a personal perspective, because I do think people are your greatest power, and try to, as a group of people, try to focus on those people that are having hardships and try to support them now. And again, that gets back to this is like a short-term fix with all of these people. But then there's also a long-term thing to look at, like what, does their involvement in their careers and their career journey growth really help them and actually bring back to the world. So, you can have focus split. And I think it's important when short-term problems come up, you kind of band together and try to solve those.
Yes. And I first of all, well said. I support that 100%. And I think when people focus on the short term, they're panicking. They're not thinking through like what are the possibilities? What could we do if we hung together? I worked at an organization where our chief staff executive called all the department directors together one day and said, you know what? We're having a cash flow problem. So I don't want to lay anybody off. So I want you all to go back to your department budgets and start cutting expenses. And he made it a group effort and a group activity. So we felt like part of the team and we all did that. And we were all able to solve the cash flow problem. And he came back like a couple months later and said, yeah, we're good again. Thanks everybody for pitching in and helping. So I think right then and there, you're talking to the people, you're involving them, and you're saying, hey, help me solve this problem instead of trying to do it all by yourself. And so you really don't want to let people go right away because they take a lot with them. Besides, you're not paying, I don't have to pay them anymore. They're also taking history, knowledge, experience, and relationships every time they walk out of the door. And you're losing all of that every time you let a person go, unless
Mhm.
you have an awesome knowledge management system in place. So I think we need to keep that in mind when we're letting people go. Also, come on, this is a somewhat rhetorical question, but it is a question that we as a planet wide community need to answer at some point. Why do we keep treating each other so badly?
That
We know we're
that's a
not supposed to, yeah, we're not supposed to fire people on Friday. We're not supposed, we shouldn't let people go at the holidays. It's just mean. So that's my
yeah.
my take on that.
I agree because we had a um part of our corporate like celebration. We do different corporate celebrations, like hopefully lots of companies do, where they get to try to get a chance to celebrate the people that are there. And somebody came up to me and they said, because I was like volunteering, so I had this little pin that said, oh, ask me a question, I'm a volunteer. And somebody came up to me and said, oh, what's the meaning of life? And I said, oh, that's an easy one. It's to be more kind than not kind. And so I totally agree. If some of these little things with um try not to, lay people off the week of Thanksgiving, or try to do things, a little kinder, I think would go a long way. And I, you know, think there's these even from a corporate perspective, from a personal perspective, those are things that we can do. And even this past weekend when I was going to get my free turkey, because for some people that do shopping, sometimes in the US some of the grocery stores give you free items around the holiday times, if you hit a certain amount. And so I was going to pick up my free item, and there was a woman who stopped me in the parking lot when I was leaving, and she said, "Oh, why are you bringing all these carts over there?" She's like, "Do you work here?" And I just happened to have a red T-shirt on, and the store's color was red, so she thought I worked there. And I said, "Oh no, I always bring like two or three shopping carts back when I go, just because." And she was there with like her kid, and she's like, "Oh my God, that's such an amazing story that you just do that just to be like nice." And it's like one thing, right? So push the extra cart, pick up the little Poland Spring bottle that you leave on the ground, say a nice comment to somebody. Just it's not an additional large effort to do a little bit of kindness. And I think if corporations sometimes did that, or even just like people on a whole, where I think sometimes like in an individual person to person connection, you can do that. It's a little easier to be kind. And it seems sometimes as you build up in groups, it becomes a little more difficult, where it's almost like, hey, a person is great, but sometimes people, yeah, they're not so great.
Yes, I think that again, well said, a great assessment. And a lot of times when I point out to people, we could treat each other nicer, kinder, better. We could take a little more personal responsibility. Like, don't lay everybody off at the holidays. Wait till January 2nd if you got to do it, if you
Yeah.
really got to do it. But I think we have to ask ourselves, do we really need to do that thing? Or is it what we consider the easy fix because we're not being impacted by it? And people will say things to me like, oh, you just don't understand, Cecilia. No, actually, I do understand. And what I understand is we have a choice in how we behave, how we treat each other, what kind of leaders we're going to be, and what kind of members of society we're going to be. And I have an ethics certification now because I'm very interested in that topic. And I teach an ethics course with Cheryl Ronk. It's really important that we think about ethics because it's how we make decisions and it's how we treat each other. So if we have that ethical mindset, like I am going to be like Craig and I'm going to move some extra carts and put them away just because it's helpful and thoughtful and I'm doing my part to make somebody else's day a little easier. And I think if we all take that attitude, if we all thought like Craig with the carts and picking up something we see, yeah, I think the world would be a little bit better place. And so thank you for sharing that, Craig.
Yeah, I need to get that on a t-shirt now. Think like Craig.
Be like Craig. I guess what would that be? WWCD. What would Craig do?
Yeah, what would Craig do?
Get like little key rings, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, well, you definitely, I will say, whatever people's religious beliefs are, Jesus of Nazareth did set a good example of how to behave and how to think. And I know a lot of times people say, what would Jesus do? And I don't think you have to believe Jesus is actually the Son of God if you don't think that. But hey, Jesus was a pretty cool person. And so you could learn from him. So, and Craig obviously has, as he's modeling, a lot of great humanitarian behaviors, which is wonderful. So, well, Craig, I can't believe that our time has passed so quickly.
Oh my God,
But
that's yeah, it's like we just
yeah,
started.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. So you're definitely going to be back because I want to hear more about your adventures as a newbie in association land. Because I think if we use the milestone of 5 years, which is how many years you have to work in the profession to consider taking the CAE exam. And that's how you and I originally connected because we were having some conversations about that. I think we're all kind of newbies till year 5. So
Mhm.
we want to hear more from you about that in the future. But before we wrap up this episode, Craig, I always like to ask my guest, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And how can they get in touch with you if they would like to talk more?
Oh yeah, the thought-provoking question, right? So I think the main thought that I want people to take away, and I try to tell this to students when I do any type of mentoring or any type of talks with them, is that I say, hey, I'm not knocking money, right? I don't knock finance. I understand money is important. Everybody has bills. Everybody has to uh pay stuff. But I try to tell them if they can, take a moment, stop, do a little introspective on themselves and try to understand what their passion is. Um, and then if you can identify that and say, oh, this is my passion. This is what I really want to do. This is how I think would make me either super happy, this would bring more kindness in the world, this would leave an impact that's more than my bank account. And if they're able to take their profession and make their profession equal their passion, I think that's the goal that I tell everyone they should try to strive for. So in from my view, I don't feel that I've left like corporate industry. I just kind of rebranded or changed what I'm doing in the industry to try to now better align with my passion, which part of it is helping people identify what their passions are and trying to be part of this like rich history of connecting people to try to solve some of these world's biggest problems.
Oh, that's a lovely closing thought, especially as we're moving into the winter holidays. And Craig, what's the best way to get in touch with you if somebody wanted to pick up a conversation with you?
So I would say you can find me on LinkedIn. It's a real easy way, Craig, CraigPolk. I don't think there's too many of us out there with that same name on LinkedIn. So hopefully you'll be able to find me. Maybe I'll share the best email address also that can get put on with this episode as well. And yeah, just connect. I love connecting with people. I love hearing stories. I love telling my story. I don't drink coffee, but I drink tea, so I would love to have a tea or coffee with anybody and just hear their story and share.
Yeah, that's great because that's really a lot of what drives the nonprofit management profession is sharing. We're always helping each other, sharing information, sharing ideas, making recommendations. So this has been just a really wonderful conversation and very wide ranging, which is what makes a podcast interesting. So thanks for joining me, Craig.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was great connecting and look forward to continuing our chats as we go. And I'll definitely keep you and the audience um, in line with what my career trajectory has been and what my journey, actually more of my journey. I'll just call it my life journey and the different stops that I have along the way.
That's right. I know people who don't like to say journey as an analogy, but I think it's the perfect one for living.
Oh, it's great. It just reminds me of like storybooks, right? The I was a big fan of Choose Your Own Adventure. So it's like that I'll call it the Craig Adventure. I'll keep you updated on the Craig Adventure.
Oh, love it. All right. The hero's journey embodied in Craig Polk. I love it. So thanks again, Craig.
Thank you so much. It was great being here.
We have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So, again, please remember to take a moment and subscribe or follow us on your favorite service so you don't miss any more of these wonderful conversations like the one we just had with Craig. Now, if you want to find this episode so you can share it with your friends or listen again, go to our website, roguetulips.com, and visit our podcast page. You'll find this episode featuring Craig, as well as our past library of previous episodes that you might want to check out. Also, if you'd like to know what's on my mind this week, because, frankly, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about, check out our blog on the blog page. And if you're looking for education for ethics, or if you're getting ready for taking the CAE exam in 2026, check out our education page and get some information there. And finally, if you are interested in working with Rogue Tulips Consulting to find out how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our services page and let's have a conversation. We'd love to work with you. So that's it for this week. On behalf of Craig and myself, we will see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.